In North Africa, Churchill's orders to his new team, Generals Alexander and Montgomery, were simple: destroy the army commanded by Field Marshal Rommel. Almost immediately they were informed by the team that had broken Germany's Enigma code that Rommel was preparing to attack them. Montgomery assumed the Desert Fox would try another of his outflanking moves and fortified the ridge of Alam Halfa, just to the southeast of El Alamein. It was, he hoped, the rock on which the Axis forces would be broken. When it came, the fighting lasted for 3 days. This time, Allied ground forces were helped by air power. The RAF played havoc with the advancing German tanks. Rommel was forced to give up, and, short of fuel again, he pulled back. It was now Rommel's turn to dig in. He chose a line between the impassable sand sea of the Qattara Depression and the Mediterranean coast. Great belts of minefields were covered by artillery. Rommel's panzer divisions were held back as a mobile reserve to destroy any Allied breakthroughs. Montgomery was well aware it was a formidable barrier. He also knew it was impossible to outflank it. His only option was to punch his way directly through the middle of the Axis defenses. He was helped by a flood of new equipment from the United States, which included the new American Lee and Sherman tanks with 75mm guns. At last, the Allies had a weapon which could match the Germans. Finally, on the evening of October the 23rd, 1942, the British opened up an artillery bombardment on Rommel's positions. The Battle of El Alamein had begun. Under cover of the bombardment, Allied engineers moved forward to clear paths through the Axis minefields. British, Australian, New Zealand and South African divisions fought to drive a hole through Rommel's defences. Rommel's artillery took a terrible toll. Casualties mounted on both sides. The Axis forces were harried by Allied air power. Finally, after 10 days of fighting, the Allied forces broke through. The following day, Rommel retreated. It was Germany's first major defeat at the hands of the Western Allies. Churchill was triumphant.
This is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end. But it is perhaps the end of the beginning.
For 2.5 months, Montgomery chased Rommel west along the North African coast towards Tunisia. Meanwhile, an Anglo-American force had landed 1,000 miles to his rear in French North Africa, Morocco and Algeria today. It was codenamed Operation Torch. The Allied First Army was soon moving eastwards towards Tunisia. Rommel was in danger of being attacked from behind. Over the next few days, the Germans flew in tens of thousands of troops from Europe to save Rommel and shore up the German position in North Africa. Finally, in late February 1943, Rommel, reinforced, set up a new defensive line 100 miles inside Tunisia and turned to attack Montgomery's advancing forces. But Montgomery had been forewarned by the Enigma codebreakers, and his troops were waiting as the German tanks rolled forward. British artillery broke up the assault, and the panzers were quickly halted. It was Rommel's last battle in North Africa. He now returned to Germany to beg Hitler to abandon the North African campaign. But Hitler refused. It was a misjudgment. As Montgomery's 8th Army now pushed up from the south, the Anglo-American First Army squeezed in from the west. On May the 7th, US forces took the port of Bizerta. The British 7th Armoured Division, the famous Desert Rats, drove into Tunis. The Allies' pincer closed, and the Axis troops were trapped. 5 days later, 250,000 German and Italian soldiers surrendered. It was more than twice the number that had surrendered at Stalingrad 4 months earlier. For Germany, it was another momentous disaster. The following day, the British Regional Commander-in-Chief, General Harold Alexander, signalled Winston Churchill, "Sir, it is my duty to report that all enemy resistance has ceased. We are the masters of the North African shores." Mussolini's gamble in North Africa had taken a terrible toll on German resources. It was about to have even more serious consequences for both him and Germany.